It's 7:45 on BBC Radio Kent Breakfast with John and Maggie. Jobs and investment in Dover Port will be under threat if it's not allowed to dredge material from the Goodwin sands. That's the claim from the Harbour Board after campaigners raised concerns that the work could disturb wildlife and war graves at sea. Neil Wiggins is a community director on the board for the Port of Dover.
To create the land required to deliver the port capacity and to deliver the extra space required for the new businesses, we need to reclaim some of the land from the sea. And the Goodwin sands have been identified as the least environmentally damaging option to source aggregate from to deliver both the national and the local priorities.
Campaigners aren't convinced with the Harbour Board plans. Our reporter Yvette Austin has been to meet people against the dredging.
In 1940, the Battle of Britain was raging in the skies above the English Channel. Aircraft from both sides in the war were lost and bodies never recovered, including flying officer John Kerr Wilson, known as Jack, who was stationed at Gravesend. And now his nephew, Richard Kerr Wilson, is heading out to the sands to pay his respects.
I feel quite emotional because he was one of 4 brothers and I knew all my other uncles reasonably well. And so this is the closest I've ever got to him. And he was probably guarding the evacuation from Dunkirk, which was going on at that time. So it's quite evocative coming out here. The thought of them dredging when there are so many is appalling.
Which is why there's so much resistance to a plan by Dover Harbour Board to dredge nearly 4 million tonnes of sand from the Goodwins, all part of its rejuvenation of the town's western docks. The sand would be used to fill in areas of the current docks to create more space to handle cargo. There'll also be a transformed waterfront with a new marina, shops, bars, cafes and restaurants. And they say 99.7% of the Goodwins will remain untouched. Wow, that's huge. But campaigners aren't convinced and say the area is a war grave that shouldn't be touched. David Brocklehurst, chairman of the Kent Battle of Britain Museum, has compiled a list of 60 aircraft and 70 airmen he says were lost on the Goodwins in 1940 alone.
It's just disrespectful. If it was one of their relations, they probably would feel the same way as we do. But unfortunately, these days, it seems to be that money counts. Wrecks are being covered and uncovered all the time. Most of the surveying they keep quoting they're going to do will only touch the surface and won't touch really where the aircraft and vessels will be. And the only time they'll be disturbed is potentially if they actually dredge that area.
Something else that's concerning the campaigners is how the dredging might affect wildlife that lives in and around the sands. The proposed dredge site falls within a recommended marine conservation zone. There are 50 such zones around England's coast already designated. This one is pending government approval. Bryony Chapman is from Kent Wildlife Trust.
Well, the proposal is to remove millions of tonnes of sand and all the life in it. So all of those wonderful creatures that live within the sand and support the fish, which support the birds and the seals, would be removed. And we just don't feel that that's appropriate in an area which is meant to be protected.
The government's marine management organisation will decide whether or not the dredge can go ahead. And it's now requested a special magnetic survey be done to look for archaeological sites. Dover Harbour Board says the sands have been dredged before, and this one is vital to deliver the sympathetic regeneration of Dover awaited for more than 70 years. This is Yvette Austin reporting for BBC Radio Kent in Dover.
A Ministry of Defence spokesman said the final resting places of those who bravely gave their lives serving our country must be treated with respect, and disturbing those sites is not allowed. Having become aware of proposals to dredge areas of Goodwin Sands, we have reminded the Dover Harbour Board of their legal responsibilities. We'd love to hear from you this morning. What do you think about dredging the Goodwin Sands? Should it go ahead? Give us a call, 03459 811111.
Now, jobs and investment in Dover Port will be under threat if it's not allowed to dredge material from the Goodwin Sands. That's the claim from the Harbour Board after campaigners raised concerns that the work could disturb wildlife and war graves at sea. Neil Wiggins is a community director for the Port of Dover. He's with us this morning. But let's start with Fiona Punter from the campaign group Goodwin Sands SOS. Fiona, good morning to you.
Good morning,
Now, the
John.
Port of Dover says that jobs and investment are under threat if they don't dredge the Goodwin Sands. What do you make of that?
Well, we'd love to know where all these figures are coming from. In May last year, the construction budget was quoted as 120 million. In less than a year, the construction budget has now spiralled to an incredible £250 million. We wonder who's in charge of the finances at Dover.
But I think what they're saying is that if they have to spend an extra £21 million getting the sand from the Thames estuary, for instance, that's £21 million they can't spend on the regeneration of Dover.
Well, a lot of the regeneration is coming from private companies. In the original scoping report provided by Dover's own advisors, the cost saving was meant to be 6.7 million. Under the spiralling budget, they're now saying that's going to be 20 million. Absolutely enormous. So 20 million, which is 8% saving.
Are you saying that you think that figure is wrong, that 21 million figure is wrong?
We'd like to know where it's coming from, but it is still just only 2.5% of the budget. The 48% increase in construction budget is only 2.5% of that, and that is actually small beer when you consider the threat to the environment, to nature, and to all those lost.
Well, it may be small beer, but it's still £21 million you can't spend on Dover.
We would love to see the figures. The spend in Dover is going to come from a lot of private companies. The budget is obviously not short of funds, and we believe they can absorb these extra costs.
Okay.
It's vital that the Goodwins are saved.
Now, of course, Dover Harbour Board can't just do this. The Marine Management Organisation is a government department, will decide whether their survey is good enough and whether they can go ahead. Are you not happy that the Marine Management Organisation are the final people who would decide?
It's not just the Marine Management Organisation. Historic England has got a major part to play as well, including and there are other bodies too. We believe that the Marine Management Organisation will obviously make the right decision ultimately, and we're hoping they're going to make it in favour of preservation of the sands.
Let's bring in Neil Wiggins then. Neil Wiggins from Dover Harbour. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, John.
Let me give you a quote from somebody we had on earlier on the programme. Doing what you're planning to do will be like ploughing through a cemetery.
Well, that's entirely incorrect. The area of the Goodwins that we've been looking at and that's been selected has been extensively surveyed. It's an area that has been dredged several times within the last 50 years. It lies at a depth of 1.9 metres below the lowest astronomical tide, so it's entirely covered by water to the shoreward of the South Caliper, so as not to affect sea and swell breaking effects. There are no known military remains in the area, despite the extensive surveys.
Well, they don't know. You don't know, do you? Because let's be honest, the 60 aircraft, 70 airmen that might or might not be there, nobody actually knows where they are. So you can't really.
That's from the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, you can't honestly. Hang on a minute. You can't honestly say, can you, Neil, that there are no remains in the bit of the Goodwin Sands that you're dredging?
There is no evidence discovered so far of any remains, despite extensive surveys of the area, and we're going to be carrying out a further survey in the area to provide further assurance that there is nothing there.
Can you guarantee everybody listening that it will not happen that you will disturb a World War II grave? Can you guarantee that won't happen?
As a non-exec, that's not something I can guarantee. I rely on the evidence provided by the companies that are being engaged to do the surveys and report to the Marine Management Organisation. So should the Marine Management Organisation decide to grant a licence, there are tried and tested industry protocols and procedures which are followed at all stages of the dredge, and there will be trained observers on board the dredgers. We've even invited Goodwin, Save Our Sands Group, to join with us in that observation process.
They mentioned earlier, we heard that the cost of this whole development is huge. Isn't £21 million may sound a lot of money, and that figure is disputed. We heard from Fiona a minute ago who says she'd like to see the figures. But even if it were accurate, it's a pretty small part of the total cost, isn't it? That
amount of money is a significant amount of money.
Yes, it is, but compared with the whole project.
Allow me to finish, John, please. The port has borrowed extensively, £200 million to fund this development. And in order to protect the port's position and to ensure that there's no default on the conditions of the loans, the board has hedged around the loans with some very stringent financial controls. An extra 21 million, I would say actually, the original cost, the additional cost of actually just buying the material from a licensee elsewhere is 6.7 million. The full costs, which are before me, are at least 3 times that amount.
That's because of the transportation, I take it.
There's transport costs and other additional.
Okay.
And that doesn't even include the non-cash cost.
Okay, let me ask you
non-cash cost of the additional environmental damage.
Let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question then. If they say you can't dredge the Goodwin Sands, you will have to get this material from the other place.
No, I mean what will happen is there will be a re-evaluation of the project.
What, you mean the whole project could stop because of this?
Well, the entire project won't stop. Additional port infrastructure is a necessity. Cargo is growing, freight is growing on the cross-channel routes. Currently, Port of Dover handles about 17% of the nation's trading goods. An additional port capacity is a high priority for the government. So in terms of delivering additional port capacity, we still have to deliver that. And when we have to take into account the additional cost, that means that some of the nice-to-haves, the things that we want to do, the things
won't happen. I get that.
The things that I want to happen.
Yeah, won't happen. I get that. I'm going to go back. Sorry, Neil, because we are a bit short, so I'm going to go back to Fiona. Fiona, look, you've been offered the chance to get involved. Shouldn't you be talking to Dover Harbour Board so that you can come up with a solution that keeps everybody happy?
We don't want to talk to Dover Harbour Board currently. We believe under the current circumstances Dover haven't done their proper due diligence looking at alternatives. It's very obvious they felt they were going to get a shoe-in and use Goodwin Sands. The pre-disturbance surveys that he's talking about are unreliable and have been discredited. Dover's own advisors, Wessex Archaeology, said that the Goodwin Sands are the site of the highest density of maritime historical assets in the UK.
OK, well, Fiona, we'll have to leave that. Fiona Punter from the campaign group Goodwin Sands SOS. We also heard from Neil Wiggins from Dover Harbour. Well, one of the campaign groups against the dredging is Save Our Sands. Joanna is on the line now from that group. Joanna, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What point did you want to make about what you've heard this morning?
One of the points I wanted to make was that Neil Wiggins of the Port of Dover cannot guarantee they will not disturb. 2 reasons.
Joanna, your mobile phone is appalling. Can you? I don't know if you can do something about it. We'd like to hear what you've got to say, but at the moment we're only hearing every other word.
Okay, hang on.
All right.
Sorry.
Try again.
Is that better?
Carry on.
Is that better?
Well, carry on and I'll tell you.
Okay, fine. Well, first of all, the Port of Dover cannot guarantee that they won't disturb any final resting places. The technology just doesn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. And an example of this is in 2001, when they were doing the regeneration of the London Gateway port development, they had to dredge out the channel in the Thames estuary. And despite a decade of planning and a whole suite of geophysical surveys, they still accidentally dredged up a Junkers 88T reconnaissance plane.
On that basis, then, surely they won't be given permission to do it.
Well, this is what we're hoping. Yeah. But, we're really having to scrutinise the process because The MMO have a lot of work to do. They just want to get the process through.
Yeah.
Historic England haven't been as diligent as they could have been, and this is why we are here and why we are scrutinising the whole process.
Okay, and that's why there is this group, as you mentioned, the MMO, which will decide finally whether it can go ahead or not. So it's not in the gift of Dover Harbour Board to decide whether they can do it or not. Somebody independent will decide that.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
it's a
that's
marine
good for
management
everybody.
organisation.
Yeah.
It is good for everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, that's lovely. Joanna, thank you very much indeed. Joanna from Save Our Sands, making the point there that it is the MMO who will finally decide whether they can do it. And of course, she makes the point that before, when they said they'd surveyed and not Dover Harbour Board, but they dredged for the Thames Barrier, they managed to find an aircraft there.